My name is Autumn Williams, and I will be reading Lady Oracle by Margaret Atwood. I got out the photograph album to refresh my memory. Perhaps in the expressions of the faces there would be some clue, but in all the pictures of the white flanneled man, the face had been cut out, neatly as with a razor blade. The faces of my father also were missing. There was only my mother, young and pretty, laughing gaily at the camera, clutching the arms of her headless men. I sat for an hour with the album open on the table before me, stunned by this evidence of her terrible anger. I could almost see her doing it, her long fingers working with precise fury, excising the past, which had turned into the present and betrayed her, stranding her in this house, this plastic-shrouded tomb from which there was no exit. That was what she must have felt. It occurred to me that she might have committed suicide, though I'd never heard of anyone committing suicide by throwing themselves down the cellar stairs. That would explain my father's furtiveness, his wish to be believed, his eagerness to get rid of her things, which would remind him perhaps that he was partly to blame. For the first time in my life, I began to feel it was unfair that everyone had liked Aunt Lou, but no one had liked my mother. Not really. She'd been too intense to be likable. It was partly my failure as well. Had I been wrong to take my life in my own hands and walk out the door? And before that, I had been the fat, mongoloid idiot, the defective who had shown her up, tipped her hand. She was not what she seemed. I was a throwback, the walking contradiction of her pretensions to status and elegance. But after all, she was my mother. She must have treated me as a child, though I could remember only glimpses, being held up by her to look at myself in the triple mirror when she'd brushed my hair, or being hugged by her in public in the company of other mothers. For days I brooded about her. I wanted to know about her life, but also about her death. What had really happened? And especially if she had died in her pink housecoat and mules, why had she turned up in my front parlor wearing her navy blue suit from 1949? I decided to find Lita Sprott and ask her for a private sitting. I looked her up in the phone book, but she wasn't there. Neither was the Jordan Chapel. I took a streetcar to the district where it had stood and walked up and down the street searching for it. Finally, I found the house. No doubt about it. I remembered the gas station on the corner. But a Portuguese family lived there now, and they could tell me nothing. Lita Sprott and her tiny band of spiritualists had vanished completely. I stayed with my father for 9 days, watching my mother's house disintegrate. Her closets and dresser drawers were empty. Her twin bed stood made but unused. Dandelions appeared on the lawn, rings around the bathtub, crumbs on the floor. My father did not exactly resent my presence, but he didn't urge me to stay. We had been silent conspirators all our lives, and now that the need for silence was removed, we couldn't think of anything to say to each other. I used to imagine that my mother was keeping us apart, and if it weren't for her, we could live happily, like Nancy Drew and her understanding lawyer dad. But I was wrong. In fact, she'd held us together, like a national emergency, like the Blitz.